Hey there, glad you could join me. I hope you're comfortable, maybe curled up on your couch or lying in bed, because tonight's story, it's going to make you second guess that next swipe on your dating app. Have you ever gone on a date that just didn't feel right? Like something about the person or the place gave you this cold, sinking feeling in your chest? Maybe you ignored it, chalked it up to nerves, and pushed forward. That's exactly what happened to Jamie. Jamie thought she'd found the perfect match online. A charming guy with the kind of smile that makes you forget your instincts. But her night didn't end with a romantic kiss or a goodbye text. Instead, it ended with something far darker. Let me tell you about her last date. I first heard Jamie's story through a friend of a friend, a girl who swore it was true. Jamie wasn't the kind of person to believe in ghost stories or urban legends. She was practical, logical, the type to roll her eyes at those true crime podcasts her friends were obsessed with. It started like any modern love story, a dating app, some flirtatious banter, and a plan to meet at this cozy little coffee shop on the edge of town. Jamie liked that it was a public place, with warm lighting and a bustling atmosphere. Safe. The guy, Mark, seemed perfect, charming, attentive, maybe even a little too good to be true. They laughed over coffee, exchanged stories, and by the end of the night, he offered to walk her to her car. It was such a small thing, but looking back, Jamie wished she'd said no. Jamie couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. As they walked to the parking lot, Mark's demeanor changed. He was still smiling, still polite, but his energy felt different, colder, heavier. She brushed it off, blaming her overactive imagination. But when they reached her car, she noticed something strange. Her driver's side door was slightly open. She knew she'd locked it. "That's weird," Jamie muttered, her voice trailing off. Mark tilted his head, his smile never wavering. "Weird? How so?" Her instincts screamed at her to leave, but she didn't want to seem rude. Instead, she thanked him for the evening and slid into the driver's seat, locking the doors behind her. Mark lingered for a moment, watching her through the window with that same unblinking smile before walking away. As Jamie drove home, the unease in her chest only grew. She kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see Mark's car following her. But it wasn't until she pulled into her driveway that the real nightmare began. Jamie parked her car and headed inside, locking the door behind her. She turned on the lights, kicked off her shoes, and sighed in relief. Maybe she'd overreacted. Maybe Mark was just a little quirky. But then she heard it. A faint creak, like the sound of someone shifting their weight on the floorboards upstairs. Her heart dropped. She lived alone. Grabbing her phone, Jamie dialed 911, her voice trembling as she whispered to the operator, "There's someone in my house." The operator stayed on the line, urging Jamie to stay calm and find a safe place to hide. She crept into the kitchen, clutching a knife with shaking hands. Her eyes darted to the doorway, her ears straining for any sound. Suddenly, footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming down the stairs. Jamie's breath hitched as a figure emerged from the shadows. It wasn't Mark. This man was older, with hollow eyes and a twisted grin that made her blood run cold. "You shouldn't have let him walk you to your car," the man said, his voice a low growl. "He always leaves the door unlocked." Jamie didn't wait to hear more. She bolted for the back door, the man's heavy footsteps pounding behind her. She flung the door open and sprinted into the night, screaming for help. Her neighbors later told the police they'd seen a man fleeing the scene, but he was never caught. As for Mark, he vanished too. His dating profile deleted, his phone disconnected. Jamie moved out of that house a week later, but the trauma stayed with her. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow in the corner of her eye, it all brought her back to that night. She still wonders if Mark set her up, if he was working with the man who broke into her house. Or worse, if he was the man, wearing a different mask when they met. Jamie's story is a reminder that the most dangerous monsters aren't the ones lurking under your bed. They're the ones wearing friendly smiles and offering to walk you to your car. Dating can be scary for so many reasons, but what happened to Jamie? It's the kind of thing that makes you rethink every interaction, every choice. So next time you're on a date, trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, don't ignore it. And always, always lock your doors. Let's face it, dating apps can be a mixed bag. For every decent match, there's always that one person who seems just a little off. But what if I told you about a date that started perfectly normal and ended in pure terror? This next story isn't just about bad vibes or awkward conversations. It's about something much darker. Something that makes you wonder if you really know who you're meeting. This is the story of Mia, a 26-year-old who thought she'd found someone special. But by the end of her date, she wasn't thinking about romance. She was just trying to survive. Mia was new to the city, trying to meet people and build a life for herself. Like so many others, she turned to a dating app. That's where she met Caleb. He seemed perfect, charming, good-looking, and interested in all the same things she was. They chatted for a week before he suggested they meet in person. Caleb even offered to pick her up, but Mia insisted they meet at a popular bar downtown. The night started well. Caleb was funny and attentive, the kind of guy who made you feel like you were the only person in the room. Mia felt lucky, like she'd hit the dating jackpot. But there was one strange thing she noticed. Caleb kept glancing at his phone. Every few minutes his eyes would dart down, and he'd type something quickly before locking the screen. When Mia asked about it, he laughed it off, saying it was just work stuff. She didn't think much of it, until she left the bar. As the date ended, Caleb offered to walk Mia to her car. She hesitated but agreed. It was a busy area, after all. They chatted casually as they walked, but Mia couldn't shake the feeling that they were being followed. She glanced over her shoulder but didn't see anyone. "Everything okay?" Caleb asked, his tone casual. Mia nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, just tired, I guess." When they reached her car, Caleb leaned against it, smiling. "I had a great time tonight. We should do this again." Mia smiled back, but before she could respond, a shadow moved behind Caleb. A man stepped out from the darkness, a tall, muscular figure wearing a hoodie. "What the—" Mia started, but Caleb cut her off. "Relax," he said, his voice suddenly colder. "This is just my friend. He's here to help me with something." Mia's stomach dropped. "Help you with what?" Caleb's smile faded, and his friend stepped closer. That's when Mia saw the glint of something metallic in his hand. A knife. Mia's fight-or-flight instincts kicked in. She backed away, her eyes darting between Caleb and his accomplice. "Look, we don't want to hurt you," Caleb said, his voice eerily calm. "Just give us your purse, your keys, and your phone, and this will all be over." Mia's hands trembled as she reached for her bag, but then something clicked in her mind. If she gave them her keys, they'd have her car. And if they had her car— Without thinking, she turned and ran. Her heels clattered against the pavement as she sprinted back toward the bar, screaming for help. Behind her, she heard Caleb shout, "Get her!" The sound of heavy footsteps followed, closing the gap. Just as she reached the entrance to the bar, a group of people stepped outside, laughing and chatting. Mia burst into their midst, breathless and terrified. "Help me!" she cried. "They're trying to rob me!" The group turned, confused but concerned. Caleb and his accomplice stopped in their tracks, realizing they were outnumbered. They exchanged a look before disappearing into the night. Mia collapsed to the ground, shaking and crying. She knew she'd narrowly escaped something far worse than a robbery. The police arrived within minutes, taking Mia's statement and searching the area for Caleb and his friend. But they were gone, like ghosts. When Mia described Caleb to the officers, one of them frowned. "We've had reports about someone matching that description," he said. "He uses dating apps to lure women. You're lucky you got away." Lucky. That word echoed in Mia's mind. She didn't feel lucky. She felt violated, betrayed, and terrified. She deleted every dating app from her phone that night, vowing never to use them again. But the worst part? Caleb's profile was still active. She knew he'd move on to another victim, someone who might not be as lucky as she was. Mia's story is a chilling reminder of how easily trust can be exploited. We hear about these stories all the time, but we never think it'll happen to us, until it does. She moved out of the city a few months later, trying to leave the trauma behind. But the memories lingered, haunting her in quiet moments. So, if you're out there swiping and searching for love, remember this: not everyone is who they seem. Trust your gut, meet in public places, and always, always have any backup plan. Blind dates can be nerve-wracking, can't they? Meeting a complete stranger, hoping for that perfect spark. But what if that spark turns into something sinister? This story is about Aria, a 29-year-old who said yes to a setup by her best friend. The guy seemed amazing, a total dream. But by the end of their dinner, Aria wasn't sure if she'd just met a man or a monster. Buckle up, because this one is not for the faint of heart. Aria was a practical woman, logical, level-headed, and not easily scared. So when her best friend insisted she meet Nathan, a charming banker with a love for adventure, she reluctantly agreed. The date was set at a cozy Italian restaurant in a quiet part of town. Nathan arrived early, waiting at the table with a bouquet of flowers. He was every bit as handsome as his pictures, and his warm smile immediately put Aria at ease. The evening started smoothly. They talked about their favorite books, movies, and travel destinations. Nathan seemed thoughtful, kind, and deeply interested in Aria. But as the meal progressed, Aria noticed something strange. Nathan kept steering the conversation toward morbid topics: death rituals, mysterious disappearances, and ancient curses. At first, she thought it was just his dark sense of humor, but the glint in his eyes suggested something darker. As the night went on, Aria couldn't shake her unease. Nathan's stories became more intense, filled with chilling details that seemed oddly personal. "Do you believe in fate?" he asked at one point, his tone serious. Aria laughed nervously. "I guess so. Why?" Nathan leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Because I think we were meant to meet tonight. You're special." The way he said it sent a shiver down her spine. She tried to change the subject, but Nathan's gaze didn't waver. It was as if he was studying her, trying to memorize every detail. When the waiter brought the check, Aria reached for her wallet, but Nathan stopped her. "Don't worry," he said, smiling. "I've got this." As they left the restaurant, Nathan offered to walk her to her car. Aria hesitated but didn't want to be rude. The street was deserted, the only sound the soft hum of distant traffic. Halfway to her car, Nathan suddenly stopped. "I have to tell you something," he said, his voice trembling. Aria turned, her heart pounding. "What is it?" "I've been watching you," he confessed. "For weeks." The blood drained from Aria's face. "What are you talking about?" Nathan's smile vanished, replaced by a cold, detached expression. "You don't understand. You're perfect. I had to meet you. Tonight was meant to happen." Arya backed away, her keys clutched tightly in her hand. "You're scaring me, Nathan." Before she could react, he grabbed her wrist. "Don't run," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I just want to talk." Arya yanked her hand free and bolted toward her car. She could hear Nathan's footsteps behind her, quick and relentless. She reached her car, fumbling with her keys as Nathan closed the distance. Just as he grabbed her shoulder, Arya swung her purse, hitting him square in the face. The moment he stumbled, she jumped into her car and locked the doors. Nathan banged on the window, his face twisted in rage. Arya started the engine and sped off, her hands shaking so badly she could barely grip the wheel. Arya didn't stop driving until she reached a gas station miles away. She sat in the parking lot, sobbing as she tried to process what had just happened. When she finally called the police, they ran a background check on Nathan. What they found was horrifying. He wasn't a banker. He wasn't even named Nathan. He had a long history of stalking and assault, using fake identities to lure women. Arya's heart sank as the officer told her, "You were lucky to get away. He's dangerous." That word, lucky, echoed in her mind. But she didn't feel lucky. She felt violated, terrified, and haunted by the memory of Nathan's piercing stare. Arya never went on another blind date. The experience left her paranoid, questioning everyone she met. She even moved to a new apartment, terrified that Nathan, or whatever his real name was, might find her. She shared her story as a warning to others. Always trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. Arya's nightmare ended that night, but for others, it might not. So remember, there's no harm in being cautious, especially when it comes to trusting strangers. Thank you for joining me tonight for these chilling tales. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit like and subscribe to Dark Whisper for more stories that will keep you awake at night. And here's a thought to take with you. Love can be thrilling, but sometimes it's also the perfect disguise for danger. Stay safe, stay vigilant, and remember, you never truly know what hides behind a smile.